Thank you, Nicholas. So I think that, at this point we're going to, if there's any questions that you might have, we'll kind of entertain like a Q&A. And you can just stand up. We have a little mic that I'll turn on so that and we can chat. Oh, you have a question already, Rick? All right, hold on a second.
And both the mother and the baby die, I'm charged with 2 murders. So they've already said that the person in the womb is a person and that I can be punished for that under the law as murder. So why aren't we going after the Ohio by saying, you've already said the person in the womb is a person, because I can be convicted of murder for shooting mom and killing the baby.
Yeah, that's great. It's definitely an inconsistency that we need to point out, because you're right. That is within our laws. So there's some measure of cognitive dissonance within our own legal system.
Yeah, and the second thought that I had was this. This statute is good, but shouldn't there be an equal statute act to reform current adoption laws in Ohio so that it doesn't cost thousands of dollars and years of litigation for someone who actually carries a person to full term and delivers, who doesn't really want the baby, can't have the baby for whatever reason, that baby can be adopted quickly, cheaply, and legally, so that there is now option 2 to not having abortion allowed in the state of Ohio. If we're not going to allow abortion in the state of Ohio, then we also need to correct adoption laws to allow for the adoption of these newborns without the financial, legal requirements that the state of Ohio has placed on us.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Elijah Thompson. I'll respond to your question in 1 second. I have been doing local abolition work for about 3 years. Nick invited me to be up here, so I really appreciate that. So we've been going to the clinic, ministering out there, trying to get women to turn away from killing their child. So just to respond to that, I 100% agree with you. And I think everyone here knows that people who would call themselves pro-life or abolitionists are generally the people who are adopting the kids, right? So we completely agree with you. It's one thing at a time, you can't do everything at once, but 100% agree.
Well, I guess the only thought that I had was, wouldn't it make more sense to present it in tandem? Because if you have people who just say, no, what you're proposing is preposterous, if you're providing them a legitimate alternative through reformed adoption laws as well, then I think you may actually have pro-life organizations going, yeah, that makes sense, instead of saying, oh no.
What I would say to that is that adoption policy is a very complicated subject.
Hence the need for reform.
Yeah, in terms of all of the legal procedures that go along with it. So adding it to this bill would complicate matters, whereas this bill is
not in addition to, in tandem with.
So 2-pronged approach.
Oh,
2 bills.
So not the same bill?
Right.
Not the same bill, 2 bills.
Yeah, well, I know that the GOP in Ohio is working on adoption reform. one of the arguments that we typically hear from those who support abortion is basically, you're not doing anything for the kids after they're born. You're just going to let them rot in an orphanage forever. I think that argument just doesn't hold weight. And I think, if we, what we want to do is we don't want to play into the other side's argument. The fact of the matter is that I don't have to adopt every child in order to be against murder. And so, I think these two issues are separate fundamentally. One is trying to cut off the legal root of legal permissibility of murder, and the other one is caring for children who are already born. And so adoption reform is good and necessary, as Elijah said, but I don't think we want to complicate the two. Do you have any other comments on that?
I don't think I have a lot to add. I totally agree with Nick as far as the difficulty with any of this is to try to be more sly and more cunning about it, and not that that's necessarily that, because that would be a good thing if both of those things were adopted at one time. But there's a level of simplicity of the approach of here's one bill, it's completely against abortion. And man, as soon as abortion gets abolished, I bet this guy's gonna be on adoption reform right after that, so, because otherwise it's gonna be out of a position. No.
Well, there are always other things to abolish, that's for sure. But I think one other thing that I would add there is that adoption reform, being for adoption reform and working on that, is not something controversial necessarily. It's not something that is going to get you into trouble politically. But working for the abolition of abortion will. And so a lot of Republican lawmakers will say that they're pro-life, step away from the abortion issue and say, well, let's work on adoption. But at that point, they're neglecting all of those children who are being murdered through abortion. And I think there's this idea, this presupposition that if we just make adoption easier and more available, then abortion will decrease or it will end. And that's a myth. You can ask Elijah, you can ask anyone who has ever stood outside of an abortion clinic and ministered to women going in. We will say we will adopt your child, but they continue to go in. And so
I'm just afraid that what I'm seeing is that legislators are trying to make it even more difficult to adopt. Because if I don't affirm your gender pronoun, I can't adopt you. And they're looking to pass that bill so how many Christians can look at a kid who is biologically male who wants to be called her, and I'm not going to do it, well then you can't adopt the kid. So they're not making it easier. It's not an easier conversation for Republican legislators because they're not doing that either.
There's a lot of inaction. I agree. Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Since the mind thought of the pro-life movement in Ohio is that you'll never pass legislation that doesn't include exceptions to abortion, and that these are very honest, hard-working people that really believe in ending abortion, but they're your greatest enemy. What can you do to help them see the fallacy of their beliefs? You've got, right to life, created equal. I mean, really, their heart is in the right place. They want to end abortion,
that's a great question, and we've definitely dealt with that over the past year. As unfortunately, as I mentioned when I was speaking, we ran into a lot of these same dynamics. We're trying to introduce an abolition bill, and the pro-life movement actually turned out to be our opposition to the introduction of that bill. So I think having conversations is really important. Having open dialogue with these individuals and with these groups. It's much easier to talk when you're face to face and one-on-one with someone. So I think you try to entreat. Matthew 18 is a passage that relates to church discipline, and not necessarily this particular situation. But I think there are some principles that we can gather from that. There's a process in Matthew 18 for church discipline of entreating the brother that is erring, the brother that is sinning. And so I think, going to these groups and entreating them and trying to have these open conversations and showing them the inconsistencies of their thoughts, what their views are leading to, and also, doing that with an open Bible, because ultimately the Bible, the Word of God, is what God uses to change someone's mind. So those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with Nick, and already we've seen, I don't know how familiar you are, but already we've seen multiple people come out of those organizations and come into abolitionist organizations. When we're out there at the abortion clinic and Creative Equals there, we're treating them kindly, although, we really do see the truth of the matter that pro-life really does oppose abolition. We treat them kindly, we talk to them, and there are some of them who we have met who clearly they appreciate us, and they appreciate our position, and they appreciate the fact that we don't have a ban on sharing the gospel at the abortion clinic. Okay, I just want to say that again. They appreciate the fact that we don't have a ban on sharing the gospel at the abortion clinic. Because pro-life organizations, there are some that do. You can't share the gospel at the abortion clinic because you have one goal there. You're trying to get the mother to turn away from killing her baby. And even if she turns away from killing her baby, you better not share the gospel with her. Okay, so that's why everything comes back to the Bible. Everything comes back to the Word of God as the foundation. And so to answer your question, how do you convince them? Well, you do everything that Nick says, and then you rely on God. Because ultimately, throughout history, what have we seen? When God moves, big things happen. So we trust in God, and we let God do the hard work of drawing people into himself, right? We let God do the hard work of causing revival. We just do our job. Nick and Austin do their job, and they entreat the leaders, and I do my job on the street, and we do our best and pray that God uses us and that God encourages people like you right now that you can do something as well. And I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I'll hold this.
I would also add that I was once in the pro-life movement and once thought differently than what I do now. It took me a few months to come around, and my wife actually came around before I did. So I would also say being patient, being gracious, being willing to keep those lines of communication open, and showing people things like this. I think this is shocking to a lot of people, because a lot of people within the pro-life movement, I would say they're not pro-life establishment. So they might be themselves for the criminalization of abortion, but for whatever reason, they're not seeing that the organization that they're working for is actually working against it. Another story is Austin Bible, who I mentioned is the president of an Abortion Ohio. He worked for a pro-life organization, Created Equal, in Columbus, and he was fired for attending an abolitionist conference, actually. So he came out of that movement as well. So, and a lot of the national leaders in the abolitionist movement were once in the pro-life pro-life movement as well. So, yeah, all that to say is like, just have conversations with people, open your Bible with people.
Yeah. In regards to issue 1, has there been any thought given by your organization to try to do more of a community outreach and to actually pass a second ballot initiative to overturn issue 1? It seems like going the social route and actually changing hearts and minds would hold a lot of water in addition to trying to pass legislation.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've considered that and are still working through that a little bit. So I guess just a few things that we've thought through is that one would be, it would be difficult to bring out it would be difficult to muster the manpower that is needed to gather the amount of signatures for a ballot initiative to appear on the amendment. So, take for example issue 1, it needed over 400,000 signatures to appear on the November ballot. And I think they gathered over 700,000, and around 200, almost 300,000 of those signatures were thrown out, were regarded as invalid for some reason. And it took them, it was a massive effort to collect those signatures in the first place. So, speaking about a pro-life ballot amendment that would criminalize abortion, we just don't have that manpower at this point. It would be wonderful if we could do that, but it's just not, I don't think that's a possibility for our organization at least. Because we're still at the very beginning of sort of plowing the fields of abolition and convincing people of equal protection. Now, I do know that the pro-life establishment in Ohio is planning to do a ballot initiative. However, they're basically going to do the same thing as issue 1, except for they're setting the limit at like 15 weeks. And we oppose that because there's no difference between abortion at 15 weeks or at 36 weeks, because there's no essential difference between the preborn child at 15 weeks and at 36 weeks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you mean by that. I guess the point I was trying to make with that is, if you are able to, at a large enough, at a social level, be able to pass with majority vote in Ohio, it just seems like that would hold a lot more weight than just going direct through the legislature and essentially overturning the votes you had, especially for already, ministering at clinics, at churches. It seems like it's moving the needle at a social level would also really go far with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is merit to that. I think the timing would maybe need to be a couple years in the future.
Yeah. So, for anyone who didn't hear his question, again, just to restate it, was what about a social movement and another ballot initiative? So, as far as the word that I want to give to you is that this is not a issue that only needs to be top down, right? This is not an issue that Nick is saying only needs to be him going to the leaders and doing that. And that's why I'm on this side, right? And that's why we've got a team of people, and we have solid people who are consistently going with us to these places, and now we're expanding. We're going to college campuses, talking to students, interacting there. We're trying to expand with video and eventually a YouTube page that's similar to a group called Abolitionist Rising. If I would highly recommend you look up their videos. They're another great resource beyond End Abortion Now, which is an amazing resource. So this is not a one-sided. We're attacking this from all different directions because leaders need to hear the gospel, and people on the ground need to hear the gospel, and we don't. And I say the gospel because we are sharing the good news of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ with these people. We are not just going out there and saying, "Hey, I want to convince you that this is a life and it needs to be, equally protected." We're also saying the reason why we do this is because God says in His Word that He opposes a law that would punish the innocent or acquit the guilty. That's what He says in Proverbs. He detests that. So we're sharing both things. So if you want to get involved on the ground, let me know. I would be happy to talk to you.
Maybe I'll just take a minute to explain a little bit more about what I was mentioning with the pro-life ballot initiative. The pro-life establishment is planning to basically put an initiative on the ballot this coming year that would limit abortion at 15 weeks in Ohio, and that would be at the constitutional level. So again, the same thing as issue 1, but whereas issue 1 had no limits on abortion, this one would have a 15-week limit on abortion. And it may sound a little strange to hear that we're opposing that, but again, the reason that we're opposing that is because, well, really twofold. One, because it's a perversion of our Constitution, because our Constitution, ideally, in its language, is supposed to guarantee equal protection to all people. So to permit, to allow abortion at all would be at odds with our Constitution. Not only our Constitution, but with the higher law, God's law. And then I guess that leads into the second reason is that we don't support any toleration of abortion at the legal level. So.
Yeah. What's your relationship with End Abortion Now, like the national organization? So the reason I ask that is because you mentioned that End Abortion Ohio, you hold to the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. But just from my current understanding, and I don't know a whole lot, but just knowing a little bit of Jeff Durbin, I think he's the executive president of the national organization, but he's has a little more of a Presbyterian leaning, I guess. Just like a slightly different tradition. So I guess what does that entail for you guys?
Yeah. He is Baptist, I believe. His church is Apologia Church in Arizona. James White is also one of the elders there, if you're familiar with him. His podcast is The Dividing Line. But we have a good working relationship with them. We've had Zachary Conover, who was also in the video, come out twice in the past year to speak at our various events. So we stay pretty close in touch with them. We have a group chat on Signal with them. They're a great organization. They afford us a lot of resources. All in all, they're pretty similar to us theologically. There might be some distinctives that they have that we don't necessarily emphasize or have. But we try to work broadly within the evangelical church. We have partnerships with those who have the same view of the gospel as we do. Where we draw the line is the gospel. We don't want to work too closely with groups or traditions that have an errant view of the gospel, because then we believe our witness is at stake. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Maybe, I think there were some misunderstandings on my part. I was under the impression he was not a Baptist.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so thank you.
Yeah, he is a Baptist, but he is close with Presbyterians, which is probably where I got that from, just being honest. But what I just want to reiterate is I'm a Baptist as well. I go to Summit Baptist Church in Pataskala. But that said, we are willing to go on the ground with anyone who understands what the gospel is, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ for sinners, right? Like, that is the gospel. So if they understand the gospel, and then, specifically for us, we'll try to talk to somebody and make sure that they're not, necessarily pushing some of the beliefs that maybe are out there. But that's our line where we gather is okay, we're coming together around the gospel, and we're coming together around the fact that God says, let justice rain down, let justice roll in. That's what we're coming around, the Bible and the gospel. And those little distinctives we can put to the side in order to defeat murder, right, in our nation. One of the admonitions that Jesus gives to the Pharisees, right, is you tithe your mint and your cumin. You do well. So, first of all, that's kind of like mind-blowing. It's like, you do well, you tithe, even your spices. But then he says, but you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy. So, there are weightier matters of the law, there are weightier matters in the Bible, and I think we're all on the same page that we understand that life is a very weighty matter. If you don't have your life, you can't do much else. So, that's what we gather around, is that. So there's a couple people on our team that have interesting views, but they believe the gospel.
Yeah, just one more thing on that is we try to ground our work to save our preborn neighbors in the second greatest commandment, loving our preborn neighbors. Because if we were to attach our work of abolition to anything else, such as someone's particular view on the end times or their political philosophy, then that would be bad. So we have to keep the main things, and then we can all have a good time discussing the secondary issues.